how have you, tried to navigate, so much roster churn over these last couple of weeks?
It wasn't unexpected. There were three guys that we, really wanted back. Sean and KJ and Jackson, three starters. We did not pull anybody's scholarship. Everybody had their scholarship, would have been renewed. But we are working within a budget, and some guys were going to lose their NIL, and most of them were taking a reduction, big reduction. We just weren't good enough this year. And I made some mistakes, with evaluation and inexperience, and when our experienced guys suffered injuries, our inexperience showed, especially in a year where the Big Ten was a dominant conference. So none of our portal entries have been a surprise. Again, I didn't take anybody's scholarship. Everybody had their scholarship, would have been renewed, but their NIL and their cap money and all that was either totally taken or really reduced. We have to work within a budget.
How do you adjust for that now moving forward with obviously the portal and trying to get new players in, and how do you really financially try to persuade people and convince people that you should come here to win, but NIL might not be as much as you could get somewhere else?
Well, it's not an exact science. We're working really hard to get the right guys, experienced guys. We want to get some experience in. It's not an exact science, but again, we got to find the right guys. There's obviously plenty of guys in the portal. You just got to find the right ones.
Do you look at this offseason as like daunting of like, my gosh, I don't know what my roster looks like, or do you err on the side of I have a clean hunk of clay to kind of work with and really kind of like reset your roster for the first time since joining the Big Ten?
Well, I'd be lying if I wouldn't say I was a little nervous. All right, when you have a lot of new faces like that, but again, it is an opportunity, as you mentioned. We're Zooming with some guys that I'm really excited about. Making sure we work out all the details, though, is, we got guys coming in for visits this weekend. We got a number of guys coming in next week. So we're excited about a couple freshmen that are coming in, but we know they're freshmen, and the adjustment to the Big Ten and to the level of the play that we want to have. We know that, that can be an adjustment period for a freshman. So, getting the experience that we want, getting the experience at this level is important to us. But it is exciting, trying to put a team together. But like I said, I'd be lying if I didn't say I was a little nervous. Knowing the schedule that we have in front of us with the Big Ten, our non-conference with the Players Era and some of the games we have that we're talking about, we got to get the right guys.
Where are you guys sitting in terms of NIL? You say that you have limitations, but maybe just in the scope of the Big Ten, where do you feel like you guys land in terms of the amount of money that you have to spend versus other teams?
Well, there's so much, information out there. You don't know what's accurate and what's not. Our collective works really hard to give us a chance to compete. We're not at the top of the league. We're not at the bottom. So again, I don't know how much of that information's accurate, but we're going to work really hard to use the funds we have. Like I said, our collective is really good. Our guys, are busy all the time trying to promote apparel stuff, trying to, be active with their NIL. So, we just got to take the resources we have and use them the best we can.
It was winding down, talked about self-reflection, whether it was a player, whether it was a coach, yourself in the program. What's been like for the last 2 or 3 weeks of evaluating potential changes that you want to make? I know you've got a job opening for a strength coach. kind of that process been like?
Well, I think human nature, for example, like during the season, if we win a game, I mean, we go over the film. But when you lose a game, you go over it as a coach, over and over and over again. That's why you remember the losses so much more than you remember the wins, because you're looking, what could I have done differently, So as you look at this season, it's like a loss. So you probably go over everything a lot closer. I like to think even after a good season, I could go over everything. What could we have done better? But after a season like this, after having a number of seasons where we, at least won 20 or had postseason, you look at it a lot closer. And, so, it's been a period of, looking in the mirror going, what could I have done better? And, I've tried to be honest. I didn't back up, our starters with enough experience in the second team. And so when Jackson goes down and Nate struggles with his ankles, Dev Pryor goes down with the groin, Big E goes down with shoulder surgery, we didn't have enough pieces and with experience, and so that's on me. That's, my job. The year before, we had 9 experienced guys. When you look at our roster, TJ Bomba comes in as a 5th year, Brandon Angel is a 5th year, Keyshawn, 5 or 6 years, Raheem Moss, a 5th year. We had Supreme Cook, and then Nate and Jackson and those guys had all played for us, KJ. So we had a very experienced team, and we could have handled some injury, and we didn't have any, and then the next year when we were less experienced, we had the injuries and we weren't prepared to overcome them. And that's on me. And so, I had to, point the finger at myself. First, I'm always telling our players to look in the mirror. I have to look in the mirror. And I didn't do a good job of getting our second team and our backups with experience. And so we've got to do a better job there. We've got to be, very, selective in the portal with experience. And we did our due diligence last year. We made 100 calls on every player. I'm not saying we didn't, but this year we got to hit a little better than we did a year ago.
What were your conversations like with KJ and Jackson kind of after the end of the season going into the opening of the portal? Were they NIL-based decisions, do you feel like? Or
I don't know. Not KJ's wasn't. KJ and his parents were really upfront with us a year ago when Tony and I flew to Baltimore to meet with them. They talked about having one more year to get him to the league, and I think he put his name in. He's going to go through the process. I think he's looking at some schools a little closer to home if we didn't get him into the NBA this year. Jackson, I'm not sure, what they're looking at, but, I'm sure NIL's part of it, but, KJ, we never got to those conversations. Jackson, we didn't really get to those conversations. I think those guys were just looking for different opportunities.
You mentioned the challenges with budgeting and NIL. There are a lot of men's basketball and women's basketball coaches in the country who are dealing with the challenges of rev share, the athletic department balancing, what is a priority between football and other sports. Do you feel like you guys are experiencing that, challenge because of how things are being prioritized?
Well, that's a loaded question. You're trying to get me in trouble here. First of all, football and Dan and they're doing such a good job, and the money they generate. I've got an MBA. I'm a business guy. You go with what's making money, and I don't begrudge football anything. I go to all the games. For 16 years now. When I first got here, Chip was unbelievable to me. Mark and I just saw Mark the other day. So I didn't really get to know Willie. He was here in a flash, but Mario, I'm on my 5th football coach, guys. All right. So, and, but Dan's special. He's going to do a tremendous job. So, I understand all that, and we're not underfunded. I'm not going to blame it on that. I didn't do my job. All right. So I could have done a better job, and I got to do a better job this year to put us in that position. So we'll make it work. Fortunately, we've got some people who want to see us get back to where we've been, and we got to make those figures match and get the guys we need, and we will. We'll figure it out some way.
You think it's going to take maybe a couple of big hits to kind of get that NIL revenue share, to at least show the people that are investing in it that there's a reason for them to invest in the NIL, and how you kind of balancing, like trying to get, again, the right pieces, but also the big names that could potentially bring in the NIL revenue sharing to maybe increase funding?
Well, I'm not sure it's the big names. It's just the right guys. We brought in Joe Young 100 years ago. He wasn't a big name. He was just the right guy. Dylan Brooks wasn't a big name. He was just the right guy. Chris Boucher, we got on May 15th, the last day. He was just the right guy. Jordan Bell, I don't know if he was a top 100 guy. It's getting the right guys, Again, I don't know what our fans are looking for. What I'm looking for is guys that want to be at Oregon, want to compete at a high level. Hopefully we'll stay healthy, that, we can build something. Nate Biddle is everybody's talking about right now what's wrong with college athletics. You got to look at a guy like Nate, what's right. He came back a year ago, maybe could have got other money to go somewhere, but didn't even look. No, I'm an Oregon guy. Hurts his ankle, against San Diego State. They tell me it's going to be 4 or 5 weeks before he's back. He's back in 2.5, 3 weeks to play at UCLA. Now he went 0 for 10, but he still got back to go play. Then he sprains his ankle first week in January against Nebraska. They tell me, Coach, this is worse than the first one. It's going to be 4 or 5 weeks this time. He comes back in 3, gets in the weight training room every day, comes back in 3 to go on the road at Purdue and Indiana, and gave us a chance to win the Purdue game. So, it would have been really easy for him to say, things aren't going well, but Nate, got a big fan for the rest of his life just because everything that I feel is right about college athletics, he did, so there's a lot of good things, still going on. People tend to look at the negatives. There's still a lot of dudes that want to play and want to be part of something special. And we just got to find the right guys, and that's on me. That's my job. And for 15 years, I thought we did a decent job of doing that. We didn't last year. I didn't. Okay, I'm not going to blame it on my staff. This is on me. So we got to do a better job, and I got to do a better job, and we got to make it work.
Speaking of finding the right guys, how do you go through 1,900 portal entries?
Well, we're not going through all of them. All right, so.
How do you, when you see that, how do you even begin to process that?
Well, you start with guys that you evaluated that you missed on, and you hope that you can go back to them and say, hey, you didn't think you made the right choice. We didn't, so that's where you kind of start. Guys you're familiar with. I mentioned T.J. Baum and Brandon. We had played against them. So I really had a level of comfort with those two guys. We had played against them, and I knew them. So, you kind of, first of all, go with guys you recruited, and then maybe secondly, guys that you've played against, that you have a really good feel for their game. And then it goes to relationships. But you don't go over all the guys in the portal. I think it starts with guys you've recruited, guys you've played against, And then thirdly, relationships with people that you trust, that call you. The agents have become such a big part of it. But they say you can't trust coaches. Man, those agents, they make us look like angels. All right, so they spin a pretty good story, most of them. But that's a big part of it too right now. The agencies, and they have a lot of influence on those players.
Typical offseason, you can say, hey, we need to add more 3-point shooting, or we need to go find a big. This is different where you've got every need. How do you prioritize what's important from a skill set perspective or an eligibility perspective to go and target players?
Well, we have a list, obviously, of 9 things that we're looking at to prioritize. Shooting, IQ, position at each size, or at each size at each position. At the end of it is years remaining eligibility, but it is the last of those 9 because everything is so year to year. You look in one of the services has a list, and they have black. The names in black are the guys that are going in the portal for the first time, and red, the guys that are going second, third, fourth time. More than half of them are red. They're going in for the second, third, fourth time. So the years availability, maybe not such a big thing anymore because it's pretty much year to year. So again, we do have our priority list. We know how we want to play. I think, finding guys the way that we want to play is important. It's still, Michigan won with a lot of size, but it's still a guards game. You've got to have guards to put those bigs into position. So we've got to get some good guards.
In watching this year's tournament, I'm sure it's easy to look at a Michigan and be like, oh, we'd love to have 10 guys like that and build a roster like that. But was there maybe a team that's not at the level that Michigan is in terms of their program that you saw have success during the tournament that stood out to you that maybe you can take things off of, or just anything stand out to you in the way that other successful teams' rosters were constructed in the tournament?
I think as you look across the tournament, there's so many teams that were built through the portal. A lot of them spent a lot of money to get there. Everybody talks about Illinois' team. They went overseas. They did it a different way. But those were all well-paid pros overseas that they got. That wasn't a cheap roster either. So there were different ways that it was done. You take a look at Michigan, a guy comes from UCLA, a guy comes from North Carolina, a guy came from Illinois, a guy came from Ohio State. Their team was built, from guys that came from other very high-level programs, very talented players out of high school that came together and all made a step. So again, I don't think there was any one team that we focused on. We did notice that there wasn't a lot of real low majors that jumped to the high major level that were real successful. The media has a tendency to write about those guys that do because they're kind of a unique story. But I don't think there's any one formula for the portal or any one formula. We would, have liked to kept some more guys, especially KJ and Jackson, but we're excited that Sean has indicated he wants to come back, and he's a really good team guy. We need to work on his skill level a little bit, make him a little bit more proficient from 17 in. We need to get his footwork on his shot so we can hit that 17-footer. But, he is a good athlete. He's a really good team guy. I think he can be a better rebounder. I think that's going to be a big part of his game next year. But he is someone, that gives us, the kind of guy that we want. So, but again, to answer your question, I don't think there's a formula that we're using to emulate or copy somebody, that has gone a certain direction.